Hello, friends, and welcome to this, our very first history news that's going live. So we're going to look at the history news headlines today. These are the ones that I've had come in since the start of January. So we are 9 days in, and I already have a fairly packed schedule. This is still very much a work in progress, an experiment, if you will. I have created a slideshow of the news articles. In this one, I thought that it would be good to try essentially putting as much of the article onto screen as possible. Now, I'm not going to read through the whole article, but what it's going to give you the option to do is, if you are watching this on the playback, in which case, hello, but also, very importantly, hello to everybody who has already joined us here. I'm incredibly grateful that you are testing this out with me, and we will see how we go. So what it will mean, though, is for people who are on the playback, you can potentially pause what's happening and read the article in its entirety if you want. Of course, at the moment in the description box, the Opera pinboard with all of the news headlines that we are looking at today is already in there. And once I finish this, I will go through and add the individual links to the Opera pinboard. I do have some people to thank. We'll get onto that in a minute. I am going to look at the article first, I think, and then we're going to engage with some comments. I'm going to try and do a good old safe mix of both, and we will learn together, shall we? I'm seeing some hellos. Good afternoon. It's late in the evening for me here. So it is currently, it's just gone 8:30 on Monday evening. So it's dark. My son is in bed in the next room, which is going to try and not get too overexcited, too much shouting in case it wakes him up. So I have set up this pinboard. So I'm going to give it a go and start off with the thanks that I would like to give first and foremost. I think I'm going to have to remove the watermark because it gets in the way. Next time I will figure out how to put the slides together so the watermark can still show. Maybe I'll even put it on there. Right, let's hop into this stream. So there we go. My thanks first and foremost go to James, Yvonne, Anne, Jayne, the fantastically named Binchicken Bandit and Jo. Thank you all for taking the time to send articles to me across social media. It really does mean a lot that you're seeing this stuff and you're thinking of me and sending it my way. So thank you, and please do keep up the good work, and I will, of course, keep thanking you. Let us hop in. We are doing updates, as we always do, and we have the Parthenon marbles. So we talked about this last month. We talked about how the British Museum was in potentially secret talks that were loosely confirmed. Nobody is necessarily opening up to it. Well, now it certainly seems that that is no longer the case, that it's now confirmed they're in talks. The museum has said in a statement that they are actively seeking a new Parthenon partnership with our friends in Greece as they enter a new year, and they are saying that constructive discussions are ongoing. So we also have in this a potentially an indication of what might be going on. Now, this is a bit small for me to read. My eyes aren't that good. So I have got it on my, I've also got this slideshow down on my tablet. So what we are seeing at the bottom of this is we have argued for a deal that's beneficial to both Greece and Britain, centered on a cultural partnership between the two countries. This would see the British Museum continue in its role as a museum of the world, displaying magnificent Greek artifacts as part of rotating exhibits, with the Parthenon sculptures reunited in their rightful home in Athens. This is a spokesperson for the Parthenon project has said this. Now, does this mean that the British Museum has agreed to this? Potentially. I am waiting. Essentially, I'm going to wait until the ink is dry on any repatriation agreement. I'm going to wait until those Parthenon marbles are boxed up on a container ship, wending their way to Greece, before I say the British Museum has agreed to this. I do think that the pressure is really mounting, certainly when it comes to things like the Parthenon marbles and also with the Benin bronzes. I think we're approaching something close to terminal velocity when it comes to this repatriation discussion. I think the fact that other nations have unilaterally seemingly decided that they are going to repatriate things, it kind of is starting to leave the British Museum in a rather sticky situation. I additionally think that places like the Horniman in the UK and the various universities that have handed back the Benin bronzes, that's also leaving the British Museum in a rather sticky situation because they seem like they're on the back foot. And I think we can discuss how we feel about this. And I think that for me, repatriation is the way forward. I think I've made that fairly clear. I don't know how it's always going to look. I don't know all of the answers by any means. I think that the way we approach the preservation of global cultural artifacts needs serious thought and serious discussion. But as with so many things, we need to be very careful and very clear about who is going to be involved in that discussion, and for me, who gets a seat at the table. Because we can work as a global community to protect and preserve things in times of natural disaster or conflict or whatever else may be going on in the world. We can work to do that. But as part of that, we need to ensure that we are also preserving the heritage of those pieces. And so much of the heritage, I believe, is those pieces being depicted and displayed in the setting, in the nation from which they originate, being interpreted by people for whom it is intrinsically part of their culture. I think that there are things about British life and British society that, as somebody who is born and raised here, I understand better than somebody who has not been. It doesn't mean I can be the only authoritative voice, but I think that not allowing me to be at the table is potentially a problem. So we will see if we have in fact reached a deal and what that in fact looks like. We do, of course, have to remember that, and this is from a separate article, but it's connected to the same story, that the criticisms that I've launched against the British Museum, that John Oliver has launched against them, that various other film and TV shows have launched against the British Museum, we do have to bear in mind that there is this British Museum Act from 1963, which does prevent the British Museum from permanently removing objects from its collections, with some exceptions. And those exceptions include something being in poor quality, in disrepair, there being more than one version. Now, as it currently stands, that's not the case for the Parthenon marbles. But there's also a question and a claim that there is a morality exemption, that if something is found to be in the British Museum's collection in such a way that it damages the reputation of that institution because it is held immorally, then there is certainly the leeway and the movement to have that changed. Also, I do think it's worth pointing out that the current person who sits at the very tippy top of the British Museum's hierarchy, I suppose is the word I'm going to use, that is going to be George Osborne, who is a former MP, who therefore has, arguably, although you never know who's friends with who and who's got political access to grind, but George Osborne has those connections with the Conservative Party, who are currently involved in making those laws. And I think that there would be bipartisan agreement, or there could be a bipartisan conversation whereby they talk about overturning the British Museum Act of 1963. And I've just seen a question that I'm going to try and show. Let's see how this goes. Oh, it did pop up. Right. That's how that looks. Good. Is there a petition to overturn or revoke the British Museum Act of 1963? That is, and I cannot believe I've never gone looking, that is an incredibly good question. If anybody is in the chat, if I try and Google something, I would be amazed if there was not a change.org petition. I will be honest, I have not informed myself as well as I should about change.org petitions or other petitions, whichever ones you're following or using. I'm not sure which is the most effective one, how effective they are, what they actually do. Unfortunately, I am inclined to say that principally it's going to come down to public pressure, but also I think it's going to come down to international pressure. However, that isn't to say that we shouldn't look out for a petition. And I will, after this live stream is over, that's one of the things I'm going to go and do, is find a petition and drop it in the description box and potentially in the comment section. So I'm going to remember to do that. Thank you. So let's hop on. This is a not repatriation update. If you have been here, Moss Chops has said that a petition was rejected by Parliament, I believe, in which case I will also investigate that, and I'll update you on that question in the next news updates live stream. Perhaps you followed the discussion. This was from a few months ago about this girl with a flute, the Vermeer. The conversation in question happened that the US gallery that first assessed this says that it's not a Vermeer, that it's in fact an associate of Vermeer's. However, the update is that a gallery in the Netherlands is hanging it as a Vermeer. And when it comes to questions of provenance, identification, both of figures within paintings, but also clearly artists, we do have some debate and some conversation. My recollection is that the US gallery was saying that this is absolutely not a Vermeer. The technique is poor, that this is essentially somebody who is being trained by Vermeer, but because of the lack of quality, it's obviously not his. Evidently, the gallery in the Netherlands disagrees. There are, as this article points out, fewer than 50 paintings. Now, I am not an expert in assessing artworks for who the painter is or whatever it is, but I would imagine that 50 is potentially a sufficient number to get an idea of style. How much is it like handwriting analysis, that you can see the brushstrokes and the foibles and the choices, and you can recognize it as a particular way that somebody paints? So in October, that's when I would have talked about this news. So it would have been part of the November. It would be the first Friday in November for the October news. We had the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. announcing that as a result of painstaking research, they had found that the girl with the flute was not by Vermeer, but by an associate. This then goes on to say that less than a month later, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, which is borrowing the painting for a major new Vermeer exhibition in 2023, has now reached the opposite conclusion and is crystal clear that the girl with the flute is by Vermeer. So we now have two people having, two institutions having a large-scale debate about this, because it either is or it isn't by Vermeer. We have on the next page, what makes Vermeer a Vermeer is his really uncanny ability to engage the viewer, to evoke a mood, a sensation, a presence that somehow transcends time. The women in his paintings have a deliberate reserve. Rather than extending something out to you, the viewer, they're pulling you in. Girl with the Flute, quite simply, does not, according to the Washington team. Now, clearly, the Amsterdam team disagrees and thinks that it potentially is a Vermeer. Now, these are both teams that are incredibly skilled at what they do, and they fundamentally disagree. So I will be absolutely keeping an eye on this story, and I wonder if there's going to be a final agreement, a conversation. Maybe we're just going to have to get the two teams into an arena like they used to do in the medieval period, and we'll have to have them do a trial by combat, a trial by ordeal to see who wins and who is right. I am seeing some comments. Justine, I'm very happy to talk about Anne Boleyn and the potential causes for her fall in a different video. In fact, I think this is probably something that could be its video on its own. It's not part of the history news updates, but we can certainly get to it. I will make a note that you would like me to talk about that. And Princess Poppy, was the girl with the flute perhaps Vermeer on a bad day? Well, look, these are absolutely things that should be questioned. I think that people do have bad days, don't they? So perhaps it is him. He just fell out of love midway through the painting, or for whatever reason, it just looks slightly different. So this is a very long article. Something the Rijksmuseum has not done enough to show its workings. We apparently don't know their arguments yet. This, I think, is very telling, that if we haven't seen their working, if we haven't had it peer reviewed, then we're going to have to wait, I think, a little bit longer, because they will, of course, have to say why they think this, and they're going to have to lay it out, and the academics behind it are going to have to tell you why they think that. The other question is, if the museum in Washington is correct and it's not a Vermeer, who painted it? And can we figure out which artist from his studio it may have been? Because I think that's one way to settle it, is if you can prove that not only is it not a Vermeer, but you can say whose it is, then that would lend far more weight to the Washington argument. Equally, the Rijksmuseum is going to have to tell us why it thinks it is indeed a Vermeer. So I think hopefully we will see some news about that in the not too distant future. Those were the updates. They were quick. We are now moving on to the new news, and this font is very tiny, although perhaps for you, if you are on a bigger screen, it will be bigger. So I am going to look down so I can see what I am actually reading. Archaeologists uncover the oldest known projectile points in the Americas. They have found 13 full and fragmentary projectile points. We are told that they are razor sharp and that they range in length from about 1/2 inch to 2 inches long. And they date from around roughly 15,700 years ago. And this has been discovered through carbon-14 dating. This means that they are around 3,000 years older than those Clovis finds, the Clovis fluted points that have been found throughout North America, that in fact we talked about in the last History News video. It also means that they're about 2,300 years older from other points that have previously been found at the same Cooper's Ferry site, which is in present-day Idaho. The findings of this and the findings of the study on these pieces has been published in the journal Science Advances. So this has now been peer reviewed. Of course, it's interesting. It's something that tells us about the earliest peoples, and getting earlier, living on the land that would come to be the Americas. It tells us about the way they built their tools and hunted their food, and potentially, in some cases, waged war against each other. If we scroll on to the next page, we have here an image of one of the dig pits, test pits, and we have a quote from individual who worked on this. So this is somebody by the name of Davis, Lauren Davis, who is one of the researchers working on the Cooper's Ferry site. And they said the earliest peoples of North America possessed cultural knowledge that they used to survive and thrive over time. Some of this knowledge can be seen in the way people made stone tools, such as the projectile points found at the Cooper's Ferry site. By comparing these points with other sites of the same age and older, we can infer the spatial extent of the social networks where this technological knowledge was shared between peoples. And a midlife crisis. Let me just pull this up. What did they carbon date? Organic material for the same context as the flint, as flint itself can't be carbon dated. That's an excellent point, and that is my assumption. I am going to see if where that talks about. We have the next page. In fact, as I can see it, we have the layers of the dig. So I am assuming that is what they are talking about. The projectile points were uncovered over multiple summers between 2012 and 2017. The work supported by a partnership that's held between OSU, Oregon State University, I want to say. I'm not great with the acronyms. The newly discovered pits are part of the larger Cooper's Ferry record, where Davis and colleagues have previously reported a 14,200-year-old fire pit and food processing area containing the remains of an extinct horse. All told, they found and mapped more than 65,000 items, recording their locations to the millimeter for precise documentation. And I've just been informed that OSU is Oklahoma State. Apologies. And so I am assuming that they are carbon dating mineral and organic material and ground layers surrounding the flint. That is, but I am by no means involved with carbon dating. So that's my best guess. And if I do find out more, I will certainly let you know in the next update video. Moss Chops has asked me about my Betwixt the Sheets episode with the fabulous Kate Lister, where I talked about trash, which I can also link down below. It's there, and it does relate directly to my doctoral thesis, which I did write on how the words trash and trifles get used over around about 100-year period from 1519 to 1614. In it, I explore the culture of abjection and what it means to try and avoid things and why people might do that. Moving on to I have some other comments and questions. For the Vermeer discussion, just hopping back, James says the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. had an exhibit about artistic exchange in the time of Vermeer, which placed his work next to his contemporaries. So the curators might have that on their mind. Very interesting. So perhaps that is in some way feeding their research in and potentially guiding them to say that this is not a Vermeer. Very, very interesting. Hopping on to the next piece of new news, and we have some repatriation, some seizures. Police have seized hundreds of Paleolithic tools, Roman tiles, bones, and other ancient artifacts from 2 homes in Spain. Now, as I did with the last video, I'm trying to put the new news into some kind of historic order. So that's why we looked at the flint points, because they are the oldest thing we have to look at. And I'm going with Paleolithic being next up. So that's why we're looking at this next. So we have Spanish authorities seizing hundreds of ancient skeletal remains and archaeological artifacts from the homes of 2 men in the province of Alicante. And we have some fabulous pictures that have been shared. This was actually announced on December the 30th from the Civil Guard over there. The 2 men who own the objects are under investigation for the misappropriation of goods of artistic, historical, cultural, or scientific value, although charges against them have not yet been filed. So I am going to use the word allegedly liberally. But we have what looks like incredible finds, from fossils to pots to bones to all sorts of tools. We hear that a raid of the property yielded numerous bone fragments believed to be between 4,000 and 5,000 years old. On top of that, we have another picture showing some quite incredible amphoras. They have been seized too. between the two properties, we are told that some 350 archaeological pieces and nearly 200 skeletal objects were uncovered. They are currently being held and conserved by a nearby archaeological museum. I want to say that's pronounced Denea, but I should have. I like to Google the pronouncing of names of things. I read it and then go, I must see how that's pronounced. But they're being investigated by this archaeological museum. As the investigation is unfolding, there are probably, I think, going to be some police charges, allegedly. We shall see. We have the Bavarian State Office for the Preservation of Monuments reporting the discovery of an ancient wishing well in Bavaria, in Germany. They found a wooden-lined well, and within it, this is during construction work. Construction work seems to be a great place at a great time for people to be finding really cool stuff. And increasingly, because people are putting in archaeological digs on these sites of construction, it's become essentially the status quo in many, many places, that before you do loads of building work, you make sure that there's no really fascinating archaeology on the site. And I mean, this is what's happening in London for decades. And because of that, we are finding really cool stuff, because the architectural firms start funding these archaeological digs. And I think this is really interesting, that for years, the bane of archaeologists were these developers who were just putting up developments or building tube stations and essentially running roughshod over archaeology. But now they have created this almost symbiotic relationship, and some academically trained archaeologists get the majority of their work and the majority of their payments from working with developers on these fantastic sites. And that seems to me to be a good relationship to start having. So what have they found in this well? Within the sediment layers on the well's bottom, archaeologists have uncovered bronze garment pins, metal spirals, a pendant animal tooth wrapped in metal, and more than 70 ceramic vessels. So these vessels are richly decorated bowls, cups, and pots, which are normally found in the Middle Bronze Age, placed potentially as grave goods. Each of these vessels are completely intact, suggesting that they were ritually deposited with care rather than simply thrown in and smashed from the fall. So pins and things are the stuff that's easily lost. The Thames will be full of little dress pins. What we can see here, these are not dress pins. These are not the day-to-day wearable necessary things that are used to hold together clothes. These are decorative. These serve a purpose. These are to ornament. You can see by the length, you can see the fact that the heads are large, that some of them have like little knobbly bits. These are intended to be beautiful. And clearly, so too are the bowls. So then the question is, what's going on here? And somebody has, it's been connected, somebody from the Bavarian State Office, as we see here, has connected it with wishing wells. Even today, found something magical about them for many people. People drop coins and hope their wishes will be granted. So we can't, while they can't explain what people are doing 3,000 years ago, and this is one of the incredible things about archaeology. And I think somebody commented on my last video talking about the models of the owls that may have been children's toys, how quickly we jump to ritual purposes. But maybe this is ritual purpose. Maybe we have to bear in mind that while the past might be a different country and they might do things a bit differently there, for the most part, in the last 3,000 years, human beings haven't really evolved all that much. I think we're still going to be driven by very similar things. We're going to be driven by a desire to have food in our bellies and a roof over our heads. We're going to care aggressively that our children are safe and warm and dry and well fed. I think we all, even the most non-superstitious amongst us, and I have in the past prided myself as not being superstitious. I say that, but I do make a wish when I blow out my birthday candles. And I do avoid stepping on 3 drains in a row, and I don't say the real title of the Scottish play, especially not in the theatre. So even though I claim not to be superstitious, clearly I am, and I think that perhaps people may have well used this well as a wishing well. We learn that excavations have been taking place since 2021 in this region, and that they have found approximately 13,500 finds, and that there's been over 70 other wells, primarily from the Bronze Age and the early Middle Ages. So I'm assuming that they are going to have to sift through everything they found, really assess it deeply. Hopefully we're going to see some exhibition coming out of this, because what a cache of artifacts to have found. And I'm just going to hop back because I can do that. I mean, I certainly would love the opportunity to get really up close with this. I mean, I also think it's one of those things somebody mentioned on my TikTok from where I promoted the video that I was doing, the last news video, and I showed the necklace that was found with the cross bead at the back, at the base of it. And somebody on my TikTok said that they really liked using historical forms of jewelry making, and that they would love to get up close and personal to reconstruct a necklace like this. And this sort of thing, I would love to see somebody reconstruct these pins to put them in their former glory. I mean, are these to decorate hair? Some of them are very long. What are they holding together? What are they adorning? And I think that reconstructing them and putting them to use is a way that we find that out. Margaret says, I apologise. 3 drains in a row, that's a new one. In fact, Margaret, I hate to say it, it's any that are odd numbered. So you can walk on 2 or 4 or 6 or whatever, but but you can't walk on 1, 3 or 5. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person that does that. I hope I'm not the only person that does that. I think maybe it's a derivation of not stepping on a crack. I don't know. But I hope I haven't given you one that you're going to catch from me. I apologise if I have. And we have looted item. So we're still in repatriation corner, although this is new news. The US has returned its first looted antiquity to Palestine. It's an Iron Age spoon. And this, once again, the team at the Manhattan DA's office, anybody in the chat who's from Manhattan, your DA is absolutely dealing with the situation when it comes to looted goods, and seems to have literally no qualms about knocking on anybody's door. And good luck to him, and good luck to his team, quite frankly. I could be wrong, but I am of the opinion that Manhattan and the precinct that this DA and his office covers is not rare. I think this is probably happening in a more widespread fashion, because seeing the stuff that people who sit on the board of the Met and the Met itself, etc., seeing the frankly brass neck of some of this behavior makes me think that they, for whatever reason, weren't bothered about provenance. That there was almost some kind of allegedly tacit agreement this is going to go on. So I don't think that what the Manhattan DA is uncovering is unusual because of the breadth and number of artifacts. I think that this is the only district that is doing it. I think this is probably happening in loads of other places, but there's less interference for whatever reason. So this Iron Age spoon, nearly 3,000 years old, ivory spoon, is going back to Palestine, and there was a repatriation ceremony in Bethlehem in the West Bank. It's dates to approximately 800 to 700 BCE. It's a cosmetic spoon used to pour incense. It's thought that it was looted from an archaeological site in the Palestinian village of Al-Qum. The artifact, we are told, is important because it acquires its real scientific and archaeological value in its authentic location. That's something I was talking about at the top of the video, that the preservation of artifacts is, of course, vitally important. I'm never going to say it's not. But part of the preservation of artifacts is the preservation of its narrative. There has been, across history, a lot of damage done in the erasure of language, in the erasure of people's stories, whether they are oral tradition or written down, and in the overriding and the overwriting of other people's understanding and teaching and faith onto that. And so I do think that placing artifacts back into their cultural setting, into their context, is vitally important, because that is part of their history. And if we're going to preserve things, let's do our very best to preserve them in their totality. We learned this Iron Age spoon is one of 180 stolen antiquities collectively valued at $70 million that the Manhattan DA's office has seized from the billionaire collector Michael Steinhardt. We know where he purchased the spoon from in January 2003 from an Israeli antiques dealer called Gil Chaya. So it is kind of amazing to me that these lines are just so well known, that there seems to be absolutely no desire to hide it. A midlife crisis says, I think artifact trafficking has long been regarded as a victimless crime now. And perhaps you're right. I certainly don't regard it as that. I certainly don't regard artifact trafficking as a victimless crime, because I think that it speaks to a wider problem and a wider issue with somebody's, I think, moral character. I think it tells me how you view other places and people that you are prepared to purchase this stuff. By no means am I saying a midlife crisis that you think that you would do it, but I think the people who do this, the people who traffic in this, I wonder how much they actually really love history. Because to commodify it in that way, to put it in your living room and hide it away from the vast majority of people, what are you doing? What are you playing at? I saw a comment on a previous video about people finding the notion of people buying full-scale dinosaur skeletons offensive. And there is a part of me that agrees. I do have questions about what should be permitted to go into private collections. And on the flip side of that, institutions don't have the money to house and preserve everything. So I don't know what the answer is. I absolutely don't know what the answer is, but I think the really important thing is that we keep having the question, and we also keep having the conversation, and that conversation can be hard, and that conversation can be uncomfortable. And I think that that's one of the things about repatriation and the conversations about it, is that we might have to be uncomfortable. We might have to we might have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, shall we say. Thank you very much for that comment. They're continuing on. We've got some other stuff, some pictures of other stuff that was in Michael Steinhardt's collection. And let's be clear, as we know from reading and looking at these things over the last few months, this is by no means he's not the only one. He's by no means the only one. But let's see what else he had. They found these gold masks. They are circa 5000 BCE. They come from a legal antiques dealer that they were purchased, we find out, in 2001. They have gone back to Israel. They went back in March. They are valued collectively. They were valued collectively at $500,000. I believe we have. I'm not 100%. No, this is also Michael Steinhardt. I was going to say, I'm not sure if it is. What we have here is a stag's head vessel. It's a ceremonial vessel for libations, for drinks. And this was purchased back in 1991. It was repatriated in 2022 and was valued at 3.5 million. It says here in the caption that it was repatriated to January in January 2022. I'm pretty sure that it wasn't repatriated to a month. So I'm going to have to find out where they actually sent it back to. It's impossible to put a value on the cultural and historical significance of looted antiquities. And I thank our talented team of attorneys and investigators who are continuing their incredible work of returning these objects to where they rightfully belong. And I that's the thing that the DA, Alvin L. Bragg, and I've seen his name so much, this has now clearly become a passion project, a labour of love, and good on him. But the expense of undertaking this work to do the legal challenges, to get the search warrants, to claim these artifacts, to do the provenance work, to prove that they were looted, and then to do the work to find where they should be, and then to start those discussions about who they rightfully should go to, because in some cases there is going to be a debate about where things rightly should be returned to, and to be prepared to mediate that. This is somebody who's having the hard conversations, to me. And I don't know the rest of his work. I don't know whether there's a problematic side to him. But what I'm seeing is somebody who is doing really, really hard work and probably, I was going to swear there, probably irritating some very high profile and very influential and very wealthy people in so doing. And this individual, Alvin L. Bragg, is the sort of person that I think we could all respect, and I hope it doesn't do masses of damage to his career. Certainly he seems to be riding roughshod over it, so we will have to see. We do also have the end of this article. In 2022, the office's antiquities trafficking unit repatriated more than 1,100 antiquities worth nearly $115 million altogether back to 15 countries. And I can't even conceptualize how complex of a question that must have been. So good luck to them. And I have no doubt that we'll be seeing the Manhattan DA's office and Alvin L. Bragg Jr. in our history news for some time to come. I did wonder if we were going to see that this would be it, but clearly there is more to come. So more new news. We are Egyptian now, and we have a question about whether we have misunderstood the reason and thus the process and the full why of mummification. We perhaps have misunderstood and in thinking that the point of mummification, the point of the canopic jars, the point of all the herbs and the spices was to create a preserved corpse, a preserved body that was prepared for the afterlife. However, a new theory says that actually mummification wasn't about preservation, it was about alteration. Experts say that the Egyptians intended to turn their pharaohs, and indeed important individuals, into statues, into works of art with religious significance. And the people that we have to blame for the misunderstanding is, we are told, the Victorians, that when they first studied the mummies, they concluded, and let's be clear, the Victorians made a lot of conclusions about a lot of things, that preservation was the aim, because they had their own ideas about creating, forever corpses. And if anybody here does not follow Ask a Mortician, the wonderful Caitlin, then she has all sorts of conversations about forever corpses and secret embalming techniques that really goes ham in the Victorian period, when they just go into this kind of hyper mourning. So understandably, we interpret the past, and I say this all the time, that history is And the study of history is affected and implicated by the stuff you believe in. So, of course, the Victorians are reading corpses in the way they read corpses, because it's so ubiquitous in their understanding of life and death that it's just the most logical conclusion for them. And so we also, we are definitely we're definitely blaming the Victorians for the chat, and I blame them for a lot. But let us not forget that we are almost certainly doing the same thing, and I know I'm guilty of it. I know I'm guilty in this highly therapized society where we have these understandings, limited though they still are, of the human mind and its foibles, difficulties, and disease. Let's not forget that that language has so permeated our culture, and we certainly actively seek to diagnose figures from the past using terms that they would never have heard of. And I do wonder, 100 years from now, if people aren't going to go, my goodness, those blimmin' Elizabethan or those blimmin' internetites or whatever our particular time period is going to be known as, they're always therapizing the past, and we just lose all of this history because they're so focused on trying to figure out why this one murdered his wife. I am definitely subtweeting Henry VIII there. So, but yeah, the Victorians do have a lot to answer for. The approach suggests that the Egyptians believed that kings and queens were living gods, and that turning their bodies into statues after death was a way to restore their rightful form. The golden masks found in these sarcophagi, I thought the plural was sarcophaguses, but I'm prepared to be counted on that, that they would be idealized godlike versions of the deceased rather than lifelike portraits. And as Campbell Price rightly points out, it's a subtle distinction, but it is an important one. This idea that the spirit returns to the body, or in some sense animates the body, is not explicitly articulated as you might imagine. And I should have chucked this into the events, and I will do for next time, that there is a Golden Mummies of Egypt exhibition opening at the Manchester Museum in February. And I'd be interested to know where the pieces that are going to be on display come from. I have my own opinions about the display of human remains. I don't know what's going to be a feature of this exhibition, and my views on the display of human remains don't have to be your views. And if it's of interest, of course, I will be sharing it as a event / exhibition when it comes to February, when this is going to open. We continue on. One of the arguments to support this theory is that mummies of some of the prominent ruling classes don't seem to be concerned with preservation. They point out that King Tut's body is stuck to the bottom of his coffin. And this has led some people to think that the mummification was botched, that the ancient Egyptians didn't know what they were doing, and so he just wasn't well preserved. And that, I think, is another thing that we all too often fall into, is that we forget that people have been doing this for centuries. They know what they're doing. So if it may not be a mistake, it may be intentional. Just because it looks like a mistake to us, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a mistake at the time. But as Price points out, with the alternate theory that what they're creating is statues, not vessels for a soul to return to, that producing this and sticking it to the bottom of the coffin isn't a mistake. It may well have been intentional. Let's just hop on to the next page. There we go. However, worth pointing out, not everybody agrees that the preservation aspect of mummification should be cast away. We've got here a quote from Stephen Buckley, who is from the University of York. And he says that the physical preservation of the body was extremely important. There's no question of that. Some mummies do indeed look statue-like, such as Tutankhamun, Amenhotep III, and Akhenaten. However, Buckley says, though others like Tutmos III, Tutmos IV, Amenhotep II, and Queen Tai were mummified to look more sleep-like. which suggests a closer concern with the physical body inside. The imagery includes some imperfections, perhaps so the soul could recognize themselves and therefore have a home to return to physically. However, Buckley does concede that mummification was not only about preservation, but to discount it would be to miss the point. And this is the thing. We shouldn't ever throw the whole baby out with the bathwater just because we have a counter narrative. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right one just because it's new. And sometimes it might be something that meets in the middle. And this article finishes with, if Price is right, how did we get it so wrong? And we've talked about this. It might come down to the Victorians and their ideas of death. A lot of what we say when we describe ancient Egypt is less about what actually happened in ancient Egypt and more about the assumptions of Victorian upper middle class, white, cisgendered, bearded men. And so often those interpretations stuck and they were repeated and repeated and repeated. I think there's a lot of unthinking to be done. And a massive factor in this is we have to also discuss the time length that we have had for the publication of historical investigations into stuff like the Egyptians, the Romans, the discovery of these sites and what has been seen as credible scholarship on it and the publication of that. And that is, in terms of the span of history, a terrifyingly recent thing. And so the foundations upon which we are building our discussions are similarly somewhat limited because it doesn't really stretch back that far. So perhaps there is some unthinking and some rethinking to do. We've got another looted piece from Egypt here. We have this wooden coffin, which was on display at the Houston Museum of Natural Sciences. It has been returned to Egypt after US authorities determined that it was in fact looted years ago. This repatriation is part of the Egyptian government's efforts to stop the trafficking of stolen antiquities. We are seeing here that 2021, authorities in Cairo succeeded in getting 5,300 artifacts returned to Egypt from around the world. This sarcophagus is 3 meters tall or 9.5 feet tall. We can see that it's got a brightly painted top surface. It might have belonged to an ancient priest named Anken Amat. If I've pronounced that wrong, I apologize. But they do also say that the inscription has been erased. It was symbolically handed over at a ceremony in Cairo. And this has, once again, if we see, the handover comes 3 months after the Manhattan District Attorney's Office determined that the sarcophagus was looted from Cairo, smuggled through Germany into the US in 2008. And once again, it's our boy, Alvin L. Bragg. This man is a superhero. Bragg says the stunning coffin was trafficked by a well-organized network that's looted countless antiquities from the region. We are pleased that this object will be returned to Egypt where it rightfully belongs. He said that the same network that had smuggled the coffin out of Egypt that was featured at the New York's Metropolitan Museum, and that they bought the piece from a Paris art dealer in 2017 for about $4 million. So this is another gilded coffin. This is a green coffin here, but a gilded coffin that they had repatriated previously was smuggled by the same network, and that one's connected to the Met, and that was returned to Egypt in 2019. So this network is clearly quite good at smuggling large Egyptian artifacts. "60 mummies have been found in 2 tombs in Luxor in Egypt." This has been done by a team of Spanish archaeologists. I'm just going to pull up this from Bragg will have every right to brag about his work in returning these objects. Love a pun. Absolutely. Let's have the bragging there. Also, we have mummification was performed on all kinds of Egyptian, not just pharaohs. It certainly was. Dave and Gina, and Vivian points out that lots of cats mummified. They certainly were, absolutely. So mummification is not simply a pharaonic thing. We have. So this has been, as team of Spanish archaeologists have been working this, two tombs built after the 18th dynasty. So this is 1550 to 1292 BCE. There are two chambers that connect the discovered tombs to a vizier's burial place with a chapel containing 30 columns with epigraphs. And the site, we are told, is a rich example of the architectural style and evidence that the vizier's tomb at some point became a necropolis. Until its discoveries, all the museums that buried in the area were the senior officials of the clergy of Amun of Thebes. Since the bodies were mummified in death, experts say they were certain these bodies belonged to members of the higher social classes. Spanish news agency EFE posted a video on YouTube, which will clearly be, there's clearly a link there that you can click. So if you wish to, you can go to the article that is once again linked in the Opera pinboard. So you can click on it there. And describing how the Spanish Archaeological Mission discovered the tombs in late last year. I haven't watched this video, so I'm not sure what language it's in and if there are subtitles, but perhaps there will be. I assume it's potentially linked on this video. There may be a way for you to understand it if you don't speak Spanish. There's going to be an exhibition of the contents of this vizier's tomb, including a sarcophagus adorned with the god Amun at the Luxor Museum. And there is going to be some more excavations that are slated to resume at the end of September. So I'm assuming that's September 2023, with a restoration of the Vizier's Chapel and a reconstruction of the 6 columns. So is that telling us then that there's going to be the capacity for people to visit the tomb once they have done that? Perhaps. So we will keep an eye out on those new digs, see what's brought up, and we'll also keep an eye to see what the plan is when the excavations and restorations are completed. Still with the new news, and we have more LiDAR. I think this may be connected to the one from last week, but also at the start of this month, about the discovery of the Mayan civilization and their buildings and constructions in northern Guatemala. So here we can see this is the LiDAR map with a whole bunch of structures that have been mapped onto it. LiDAR is this relatively new technology that allows you to see through things like foliage, tree cover, all sorts of things that might obscure the natural landscape from above, essentially. So you can get a very big scale idea of what a land structure looks like. And so it can be used to map like this, but also then to figure out where you want to drill down specifically to see if you want to do a test pit to get finds out, if you want to do some carbon dating, etc. LiDAR seems to be popping up in the news more and more and more. This is very small, so I'm going to put it up here. Oh, no, that's gone small. There we are. So here we see, in studying their maps, they're able to see this civilization is made up of more than 1,000 settlements. So we talked about this in last week's video, but this is a better image than the one that I showed, covering approximately 650 square miles that were linked by multiple causeways. And just one thing here. Did I know that the Maya civilization is a topic taught in Key Stage 2? I did not know that. That is very interesting. And I hope they're also being shown these new finds. How fascinating. That certainly wasn't taught at Key Stage 2 when I was at school, but that was, I'm not going to say how many years ago. I'm not going to date myself, but it was a while ago. Ida, you are most welcome. I'm glad that you're here, and thank you very, very much for your kind gift. I'm very much enjoying these live chats, and the more I do them, the clearer it's going to be, and the more I will know how to read things. It will get better, I promise. But I'm fairly pleased with how it's working out so far. I feel like there's some rough organisation happening in the chaos that is my mind. Anyway, back to what they have here. In studying their maps, they are able to see that this is linked by multiple causeways. They are also able to see that the people who once lived in the settlements, that they've been densely packed, and which has counteracted theories that suggested that early Mesoamerican settlements tended to be sparsely populated, which I was not aware of that was the theory. How interesting that they have said that this is actually not the thing that's happening, that they were very densely populated. I'm reminded of that other find that's not Mesoamerican, but I'm going to pronounce this terribly, Çatalhöyük, where they had found just people building on top of people as well. So it's interesting that the Maya civilization seems to also have been densely packed. Thank you, Cheryl. You're very kind. Thank you very much for the gift. I'm very, very grateful. And thank you for being here. And also thank you to Cindy for saying I'm doing a great job. I'm very pleased that you think so. I'm very pleased to have you here. And let's see. So what we have here is the causeways, which were cleared raised beds used as roads, created 110 miles of traversable pathways. So people could go from settlement to settlement. And that this would have made it easier for them to engage in a collective labour, essentially, work together, collaborate. They also found evidence of large platforms and pyramids in some settlements, which they think may have worked as some kind of centralised hub for work, recreation, and politics. They found ball courts that prior research has shown were used for playing a variety of sports that are native to the region. And that the people had also built canals for moving water and reservoirs and for holding it so they could store it up during dry periods. So this is a really technologically advanced, highly socialized, highly collaborative civilization is what I think we are being painted here. And I'm assuming that we are only going to get more understanding and research as the work that comes off the back of this live technology, as that gets really fully put into context. So I'm absolutely sure we're going to have some great updates for this. And for those kids that are studying it at school, my goodness, what a time to be studying it, because it seems like the scholarship is changing day by day. How brilliant. And there's another change in scholarship in the new news. We have finally figured out how Roman concrete was so durable. And I think this is incredibly fascinating, because what we do see is that Roman structures survive. Walls, aqueducts, viaducts, temple buildings really are very impressive survivors. And the question as to why this might have happened seems to have been answered. So in this article we see that the properties of this concrete have generally been attributed to its ingredients. Pozzolana, which is a mix, we're told, of volcanic ash named after the Italian city of Pozzuoli, where the significant amount of this can be found, and also with lime. So when mixed with water, these two materials react to create a strong concrete. But an international team of researchers led by MIT have found that this is not the full story, and that actually the materials might be slightly different from what we originally thought, and but additionally, on top of that, that the techniques used to mix them may also have been different. And the smoking gun, we're told, are the small white chunks of lime that seems to be found in this otherwise well-mixed concrete. These chunks, once again, had been attributed to a mistake. However, as Masick of MIT said, that the idea that this is some kind of mistake has always struck them as being inappropriate or bothersome, pointing out if the Romans put so much effort into making an outstanding construction material, following all of the detailed recipes that had been optimized over the course of many centuries, why are they going to put so little effort into ensuring the production of a well-mixed final product? There has to be more to the story. And that's a very, very valid point, I'd say. So The team, which was led by Linda Seymour, studied 2,000-year-old samples of Roman concrete. And they have some questions in mind. So the nature of the lime used, and how this mixing's happening, why these lumps and chunks are being found in it. Mixing quicklime with water, we're told, produces slaked lime or calcium hydroxide. This is a slightly less reactive, less caustic paste, which is different from building work that's happening in the medieval period, where the very caustic slaked lime is made. Based on this team's analysis, they think that the concrete was probably mixed by adding the quicklime directly with this volcanic ash and water at extremely high temperatures, in addition to slaked lime, which the team calls hot mill mixing. And this is what results in the lime clasts. The benefit of hot mixing, we're told, is twofold. When the overall concrete is heated to high temperatures, it allows chemistries that are not possible if you only use slaked lime. And so producing high temperature associated compounds that would not otherwise form. Second, the increased temperature significantly reduces curing and setting times, since all of the reactions are accelerated, allowing for much faster construction. So that's really interesting. What we're seeing there is that they are playing with the chemistry. They're working at heat, which I'm sure must have been fairly dangerous and risky. But they figured out to work at heat, they get something that sets quicker and clearly sets harder and more durably. Isn't that brilliant? If cracks form in the concrete, the kind of cracks that might destabilize the building, they travel to the lime clasts, which then have a higher surface area than other particles in the matrix. If water then gets in to that crack, it reacts with the lime already there to form a solution that's rich in calcium. So essentially, that sounds like it's forming a scab. How cool is that? So this has already been observed in the concrete from another 2,000-year-old site, where the cracks essentially seem to scab over. They're filled in with calcite. We are told this could explain why Roman concrete from seawalls built 2,000 years ago has survived intact for millennia, despite the ocean's constant battering. I mean, the cliffs are falling down, but these walls are still there. And brilliantly, this article ends, the team is now working on commercializing their concrete as a more environmentally friendly version to current concrete. How interesting. We could very well have Roman concrete going and building our buildings in the very near future. Quarry workers in England have struck gold, we're told, with an Elizabethan history lovers gold, with a discovery of a rare 16th century ship that has been remarkably preserved by sediment. This was found just outside Dungeness in Kent, and they found a shipwreck. They called in Wessex Archaeology, who swiftly recognised what they'd found. They excavated more than 100 timbers from the ship's hull, and this is funded by Historic England. The planks of wood have then been dated through dendrochronological analysis to around 1558 to 1550, so solidly Elizabethan in there. And so it's because it was preserved in sediment, it's a very good find, but it was completely, we're told, unexpected. It's going to teach us loads about this period, about their shipbuilding. And as we know, the Elizabethan era and its ships are almost synonymous. So very interesting that we're going to find out more stuff in that way. And here we have the interior of the ship. I'm sure that more studies are going to be found. This is really the high point of the Elizabethan shipbuilding, and to have such a great preserved find is going to be really informative. We are told that they have digitally photographed and laser scanned every bit of it. So we are going to get a complete 3D model of the vessel that's estimated was 82 feet long and would have weighed about 150 tons. What we don't know is what ship this was, although maybe we might find out as we carry on. Staying with the new news, we have something that's described as a creepy 17th century baby foot portrait found in the home of an eccentric Elizabethan farmer that's going up for auction. Now, I don't know, maybe you maybe you think it's creepy. I'm not sure how creepy I find it. It apparently hung on the back of a door of a cottage crammed with antiques that was rarely even seen by the owner. Then, after their death, their piece has gone up for auction. Why didn't it garner a more prominent place? Well, they have decided the reason why it was hidden behind a door is because of how creepy it is. This is set to go for auction on the 28th of January, and the auction house is calling the subject a miniature adult. But the phrase weirdly big baby might capture the particular brand of uncanniness. There is a big habit for dressing small children in portraiture in the way of their adults. As midlife crisis says, they did dress children the same as adults. Certainly after they had been breached. It does look to me like this is, of course, this could be. It looks like a very small child to me. I think it's a very young child, and it could be either a boy or a girl because they did put them both in dresses until boys were breached. And there's the child in the portrait is wearing absolutely fabulous embroidered black work. So we will have to see what it sells for, and where we go. We have another picture of it being. It's big. I mean, it's not subtle, is it? Yep. I mean, someone's gonna love it. I'm sure that somebody is going to find it beautiful and is going to love it in their home. We will. It's being sold by a fine art and antiquities auction, January 28th. I will keep an eye out to find out when it's being sold, what it will sell for, and I will report back. Maybe we'll even find out who is the owner of the creepy baby. Who does think it's creepy? Just as a show that creepy baby does not look amused. I mean, you're right. It doesn't. Maybe it's been told now it's had its rattle taken away so it could look like a tiny adult. Thank you, Becky. My laugh is infectious. Fortunately, I haven't done my Muttley laugh because that's sounds interesting. It's very wheezy. The gown of the child is outstanding. It's utterly fabulous. And what's great about it is that the detail is very, very clear and it matches the cap, the little headpiece. So I think it's reconstructable. I think that little gown and its collar and the wrist ruffs, they feel reconstructable. So I think we could potentially see that too. The same look my daughter gives me when I take a photo of her. Do you know what? My son has started doing this thing where he goes, and I say to him, "Are you giving me spicy eyes?" And he goes, "Spicy eyes." Oh, there was the Muttley. There it was. So yes, kids do have that sort of face, don't they? Well, mine certainly does. Somebody's Hadrian Ryan. Anyone's getting a blurry video on the live streaming? The sound quality is good, but the video is hard to read. Oh, the last article was blurry. Okay, it could be that. I hope my internet's good enough, and it could also. I will make sure that I mean, it's looking okay for me on the screen. So if it's my internet, I do apologise. So I will. People are saying that they're having no issues with clarity here. I'm not sure. No clarity issues here. Okay, well, we will carry on and hope for the best. Lovely. Okay. Now we've been here for over an hour. Thank you so much for all sticking with me. I'm incredibly grateful. Let's hop on because it's time to talk about events and exhibitions. Yes. Feared and Revered. This is on at the National Museum Australia, and it's my belief that this is renamed, but a lot of the exhibits were part of the Feminine Power exhibition that was on at the British Museum. I looked at the list of images of things that are in the exhibition from both, and there does seem to be some overlap. This is looking at feminine power through the ages, celebrating the power and diversity of female spiritual beings in cultural traditions and beliefs across the globe. And it says that it's from the British Museum, exploring how goddesses, demons, witches, spirits, and saints have shaped our understanding of the world. This is on until the 27th of August 2023, and it is a paid exhibition. So if you do, I didn't see it at the British Museum. If you're in Australia and you do check this out, do let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments below this video, or come and find me on my other social medias and tell me. I hope you will enjoy it. Darlene, thank you so much for your gift, and I'm very grateful, and I'm glad that you're enjoying the stream, and I'm glad that you're here, and you all watching this are all very appreciated. And Darlene, you are also very appreciated for this lovely gift and for your lovely comment. Thank you very much. Next event and exhibition. This is one that I am definitely going to see. This is on at the Museum of London Docklands. Not for long, though. It is on until the 16th of April 2023. It only just opened as well, 6th of January. The Museum of London Docklands is, my understanding is it's a smaller space, so exhibitions do tend to rotate fairly quickly. This is exploring the history of public executions in London. I haven't seen it yet, but I am very keen to go and check it out. And when I do, I will be certainly sure to let you know my thoughts on the experience. And I may, if I'm able to, I might record some content and make some shorts footage, both for my TikTok and for my YouTube short shelf and for my Instagram reel. So I do put out other video content across those platforms. I also I know not everybody loves TikTok. I'm quite enjoying it at the moment. I do also on TikTok do a little series called No Touchy Touch, where I do a bit of tongue-in-cheek, let's stop trying to make the world burn down. So if that's the sort of thing that you like, it's a bit more irreverent, then do check that out. I've seen some people posting about History After Dark, Infectious Laughs, etc. That is another thing that I'm involved in on a Wednesday night over on Instagram, but also on the YouTube, where I sit down with two of my friends and some, usually and frequently, some lovely guests. We're hoping to have a guest once a month, but all of the time it's Philippa, Catherine, and myself, and we talk smut. And it's where we swear. I being live, I'm finding myself because I'm used to going live with them, and I'm really having to remember that I keep things PG-13 here. But it's taxing, because every now and again, particularly when we're talking about repatriation, there's a desire for me to swear. So this is a paid exhibition, although the London Docklands Museum, the rest of it, unless it's one of the paid exhibitions, it's free to enter, but they do have paid bits. And as you can see, booking is available and probably advised. We also have some news about the birthplace in Stratford-upon-Avon. There are a fortnight of works being taking place, of restoration works, upkeep, all that kind of thing. And it's starting from, I believe, this Friday for a fortnight. They're going to be fixing the flooring and the plaster and the repairs. The reason for sharing this is, as we can see, there are going to be tours that you can come and speak to people of the team as they are carrying out the work. So if you are going to be in Stratford, and if you want to go and see this kind of work taking place, this repairing work taking place, and the upkeep of things, and how you maintain a historic house of the kind of Shakespeare's birthplace, then I would suggest that you find out about getting some tickets to go on that tour. And last, but by no means least, we have Ritual and Memory, the Ancient Balkans and Beyond. This is at the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World, which is part of New York University. we have the discovery from Romania of 21 stylized female figurines and 13 model chairs, none more than 3.5 inches in height, all of which were found inside a vessel at a site where a sanctuary likely stood almost 7,000 years ago. So this is being contextualized and placed in a exhibition, and I don't know who you are, but you can go away. No, we're not doing weird love things. So we are told that no textual sources have come from this prehistoric culture. The objects themselves can teach us a lot about them. So that is going on until it's going to be ending very soon, though. Notice that it opened on September the 21st, day before my birthday, 2022, but it's closing on February the 19th. So you have just over a month to get yourself to the Institute for Study of the Ancient World. Thank you so much, Marky. And I'm really glad you enjoyed the podcast Betwixt the Sheets. I really loved being on it, and I hope that I get to do more fun stuff like that. I'm now at the end of my content for today. I saw the chats was going fairly quickly. I hope I managed to catch people and pull up comments here and there. I'm hoping that I will get better at spotting stuff like that and bringing people up and chatting about it. But I also don't want this to be a 4-hour long chat, because I still have to go and have my dinner. I hope you've enjoyed this. I am, again, very grateful to everybody who shared the updates, the new news, the events and exhibitions with me. If you have things that you want to share with me, then my social medias are linked down below. For me, I do find it really easy if it's in my Twitter mentions, because it's just a really clear list that connects to the particular article. That's a very easy way for me to do it. I understand that everybody's on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. I'm on email. So there are a variety of ways to reach out to me. I do sometimes find it quite hard to keep track of my YouTube comments. For me, the app is not very intuitive. It sort of throws up all comments, not from the most recent videos. So I find it quite hard to keep track of what's happening. But I do check my comments. I do read them. So if I do miss something from you, I do apologize. I am trying to keep track as best I can. And I do love the fact that we are building these episodes together. And I hope that you're enjoying the lives. I know I certainly am. I think this is a really cool way of doing it. I'm glad that I can show more of the articles on the screen. With that being said, we have been here for the best part of an hour and a half. I am so very grateful for all of you that have come. If you are not already, please do subscribe to the channel. Please also hit the bell icon that sits beside the subscribe button so that YouTube will tell you when I next upload and also when I'm next going live. I may not be live this time next week, depends on how many news articles that come in. And on top of that, make sure, please do like this video. Please comment, as all of you are doing. It really helps to boost the algorithm. If you like my stuff, tell people about me and share it so we can build this community of people who want to chat history at this really engaged and respectful and discursive level. I'm very grateful for this community and the conversations that we are able to have and how we can communicate with each other. So I do want to say thank you very, very much. I don't know what an inches cider is, Jessie. I'm very grateful to you for wanting to buy me one. Thank you very much. I do not, if it's alcoholic, I will let you all know. I don't drink alcohol because I already have no inhibitions. They do not need lowering. I am like this and very much worse. If you watch History After Dark, you'll know what I'm like. I am incorrigible. So I am teetotal, and caffeine makes me woo-woo. So, but thank you very much, Jessie. It's very kind of you. And I, yes, do give a thumbs up. And if you are a dog or cat, please give a paw up. If you don't know what to say in the comments, put emojis. All that interaction boosts it. It tells YouTube that people like the stuff, that they're engaging with it, and that means that YouTube pushes it out to more people. Perfect. Thank you all so much. Whatever you're doing, whatever time of day it is for you, I hope that you are having a lovely Monday morning, afternoon, evening, and that you are going to have an absolutely fantastic week. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon. I will be in a pre-recorded video on Friday, 4 p.m. GMT, and it will be a premiere. So I'll be in the chat over there talking about what we are going to be watching all together. So I look forward to chatting to as many of you as I can in that, and to seeing lots of you the next time I go live to look at the history news. Thank you all so very much, and I will speak to you all soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.